actually a few years, for the economic and job recovery to restore all that we have lost from the pandemic. What we desire, however, is that the recovery is steady, that it is consistent, and that it happens in a few years, rather than the decade-long time frame of our previous recoveries. Madam Speaker, we'll be piloting the central bank digital currency to bring more Jamaicans into the financial system, and we expect this to spur financial innovation, which will deepen access to finance. And over the medium term, the central bank digital currency will play a significant role in recovering stronger. MSMEs are the backbone of our economy, and we're improving access to finance with $2 billion in this year's budget. We'll end up with 3 equity funds, including one in the gestation period now, focused exclusively on MSMEs, with a total capitalization in the 3 funds of the Jamaican equivalent of between $8 billion and $10 billion, which will be a game changer. Madam Speaker, to recover fast and stronger, agriculture will be important. The pandemic and its impact on imports has provided the opportunity to boost agricultural output and hence allocation to productivity incentives and farm roads that I know Minister Green will judicially employ. Our capital budget includes just under $1 billion to support irrigation of arable lands in Essex Valley and in St. Catherine and in Clarendon. And I'm working with Minister Green from the finance angle on storage solutions as well. The full restoration of lost jobs and economic output will require a reboot of tourism and will not happen in a single fiscal year. It will also depend on the pace of the health and economic recovery. So, Madam Speaker, what we're doing is making the investment in this fiscal year to deepen the tourism product as announced by the Prime Minister. So as tourism arrivals increase again, more dollars and more value add will stay right here in Jamaica. And that is why the Prime Minister announced the expansion of the Montego Bay Freeport Terminal to accommodate larger vessels, the construction of the Artisan Village in Falmouth, the building of a new town centre in Falmouth as well on 50 acres of land using the PPP modality, the reconstruction of the second berth at Reynolds Pier to accommodate larger cruise vessels, and to have a promenade that links the Reynolds Pier to the Ocho Rios fishing village, to the main cruise terminal and to Ocho Rios, and the new museum and other facilities at Port Royal. What this is doing is deepening the tourism product so that we'll have more investment, and when it resumes, we'll be able to take more out of it. With the amendment of the Casino Gaming Act, we will, Madam Speaker, Jamaica could possibly receive investment of over $2 billion US in aggregate, due to the eagerness of casino gaming resorts to invest in Jamaica. They're knocking on our door every month, Madam Speaker, even in the pandemic. This week, tomorrow. And we're having to assure them that we'll soon have the law passed and the RFP launched. So, Madam Speaker, we're pursuing a private sector investment approach. The Prime Minister has spoken about the Cayman Special Economic Zone and confirmed the interest of international investors to invest tens of billions of Jamaican dollars in this project. And we're working to repeal and replace the Customs Act, bringing in modern procedures that will facilitate the leveraging of our airport and airport assets, along with our hardworking people, to play a larger role in the global supply chain. These productivity incentive changes will unleash investment and jobs across the medium term. Madam Speaker, we're investing in infrastructure to improve our productivity of new and existing investments, which will support durable growth. The South Coast project is already interesting developers to bring significant housing investment to St. Thomas. And as Prime Minister Holness mentioned before, not this budget, but in a previous speech, the Montego Bay Perimeter project with the extension of the road from Montpelier to Holland Bamboo and the completion of the complete vision of the South Coast Improvement Project will see goods and people be transported from Kingston to Montego Bay eventually on a 4-lane highway non-stop. And you know what I call that? All right. Madam Speaker, we're also likely to achieve this. We're also likely to achieve this by expansion of the Mobay to Ocho Rios for 4-lane connection between Kingston and Mobay to be a reality. Madam Speaker, these are possible across the medium term. and that will increase the productivity of investment and usher in new investment too. You cannot imagine the transformative impact of connecting Jamaica's 2 major cities by direct and efficient way, of connecting Jamaica's 2 international airports by direct and efficient 4-lane highway, by conducting Jamaica's 2 major seaports by direct and efficient 4-lane highway. This will make all kinds of economic activity more productive, and ideas that may not have been feasible before will become feasible with this transformation. This is all scheduled to be completed within the medium term, Madam Speaker, and will likely boost our recovery efforts. Madam Speaker, where the GOJ has absorption capacity, where we don't have absorption capacity, we'll organize for the private sector to step in. In 2019, the World Bank had a ranking where Jamaica was ranked number 4 in Latin America for PPPs, and number 5 in Latin America and the Caribbean for our investment and business climate for PPPs. And we were ranked number 1 in Latin America and Caribbean for the maturity of our PPP environment. We will leverage our earned reputation for successful PPP implementation to mobilize international and domestic capital for investment in water, in sewage, in healthcare in Jamaica. Minister Tufton has spoken about the multi-billion-dollar centers of excellence in nephrology and oncology, which will be realized by the PPP modality. The Prime Minister has spoken about the expansion in water, which will also be realized by several PPP projects. And as the Prime Minister has announced, we are working towards having the highway projects beyond the South Coast Highway and the Montego Bay Perimeter Road projects being conducted by open competitive modality with the assistance of the World Bank. And ideally, some of these will be by PPP modality too. And there's more to come. We'll be finalizing our large-scale and pioneer industry investment regime that will put us in a position to attract major US billion-dollar investments. In targeting a robust recovery, Madam Speaker, recognizing the constraints of government, the government of Jamaica is working to mobilize hundreds of billions of Jamaican dollars of international and domestic capital for investment in Jamaica across the medium term, across the areas I highlighted previously and beyond. And this will fuel and sustain our economic recovery, and we will recover stronger, faster, and better. Ultimately, the government of Jamaica is deliberately and consciously pursuing a private sector-led economic recovery. And while the government will invest to the fullest extent of its capacity, we will reap far more investment, multiples of what the government could possibly do, from the international and local private sector over the medium term if we invest in the productivity-enhancing spaces through public investment. This, together, has the potential to transform Jamaica. In concluding, Madam Speaker, policy matters. And good policy matters more. The opposition says people should be at the center of good policy. But of course, Madam Speaker, who benefited from the good policy that yielded $90 billion of cash resources last year? Nearly 500,000 people. Who is benefiting from the good policy that yielded the $30 billion of dividend resources this year? Let me tell you, 15,000 taxi drivers, which is 15,000 people. 5,000 contract carriage operators, which is 5,000 people. Over 50,000 unemployed, which is 50,000 people. We expect more than 100,000 seniors, which is 100,000 people. Madam Speaker, there'll be an additional 17,000 devices through the CDF and through councillors. That's 17,000 people. The farmers who will receive the productivity incentives are people. The thousands who will find jobs through infrastructure construction, Madam Speaker, and the thousands with temporary employment through the Paint the City and river training activities are people. Madam Speaker, the 2 million people vaccinated, to be vaccinated this year, of which 24,000 have already been vaccinated up to 2 days ago, are benefited from the good policy, and that is people, Madam Speaker. So it is people who benefit from good policy, and that is why we pursue good policy. Madam Speaker, on this side, improving the lives and the lived experience of the Jamaican people is our mandate and focus. The COVID-19 pandemic has interrupted our progress, but with good policy, we will recover faster, better, and stronger than before. And against the background of 16 years of heavy tax increases prior to 2016, every single year, except for one, between 2000 and 2015-16, where tax increases total over $100 billion in nominal terms between 2000 and 2016, where in terms of GDP, tax increases total 14% of GDP between 2000 and 2016. Madam Speaker, tax increases average 0.87% of GDP every single year for the 16 years between 2000 and 2016. Think about that. It is because of that background, Madam Speaker, we are particularly pleased that for the 6th consecutive year now, the budget has no new net taxes. We are particularly pleased, Madam Speaker, that for the 4th consecutive year now, the budget has no new taxes. And Madam Speaker, we are particularly pleased that for the 3rd consecutive year now, the budget has some tax or fee that we have put into the rubbish bin of history by abolishing it. 3 years in a row. And this is so even in the middle of the pandemic. My fellow Jamaicans, we have agency as an independent people. We can create the future we want to see. We can fulfill our destiny as a people. And with God's help, we can pursue good policy that benefits the people, that will allow Jamaica to recover faster, better, and stronger than before. God bless you, and God bless Jamaica. God bless you too.
Madam Speaker, we have come to the end. No, man, please.
Not yet.
No.
Madam Speaker,
Yeah.
I ask that the bill be read a second time.
The question before the House is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled "An Act to Apply a Sum out of the Consolidated Fund to the service of the year ending on the 31st day of March 2022 and to appropriate the sums granted in this session of Parliament and for matters connected therewith and related thereto," read a second time.
Members of the House, we will now resolve ourselves into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Members, I now put clause 1. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I now put clause 2. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Members, I put the schedule. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I also put, members, the title and the enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Members, the question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Those against?
A bill entitled An Act to Apply a Sum out of the Consolidated Fund to the service of the year ending on the 31st day of March 2022 and to appropriate the sums granted in this session of Parliament and for matters connected therewith and related thereto, read a third time and passed.
So, Madam Speaker, just earlier, because of how vigorous and vibrant this debate has been, and how the presentation by the Minister of Finance has really topped them all to speak, I just want, with Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, to commend all the participants. Our Prime Minister, who gave an excellent presentation, the leader of the opposition, who did a fine job, the opposition spokesman on finance, who in his maiden presentation did albeit, of course, the minister himself indicated that with a big bat, he was able to dispatch everything to the boundary and over. Madam Speaker, I've already moved the appropriate motion with regards to other contributions to come, sectoral debate, and when the House meets at a date to be fixed, we will recommence that process. Madam Speaker, I ask that you recommit the presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained to allow the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development to take the bill in his name.
Members, the question before the House is that we have the recommittal of the item, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look good, don't it? It has been just over 1 year since the corona pandemic.
Minister, just a moment. Can we have the reading of the bills for first time? Minister, I invite you to ask the clerk to
Madam
have
Speaker,
the bill
I
read
now
a first time.
ask to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Disaster Risk Management Amendment Act 2021.
Clerk.
A bill shortly entitled the Disaster Risk Management Amendment Act 2021, read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of a second reading of the bill. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill shortly entitled the Disaster Risk Management Amendment Act 2021 and to take it through all its concluding stages.
The question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister to take the second reading of the bill entitled the Disaster Risk Management Amendment Act 2021 and to take it through all its concluding stages. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was just over 1 year ago since the corona pandemic made an unwelcome arrival in Jamaica since March 10, 2020. The government has employed the Disaster Risk Management Act as the primary legislative tool to manage this public health crisis. In this period, many lessons have been learned about the effectiveness of this law in relation to the government's priority of returning the country to full productivity and social activity. One of these lessons, Madam Speaker, is an unfortunate one. We have learned that while many of our residents, citizens, and visiting Jamaicans and overseas guests respect the orders issued under the Act to safeguard public health, there are still ways and too many who continue to demonstrate total disregard and, in some cases, encourage others to contribute to the threat of lives and to endanger many other Jamaicans. This reality shows that the Disaster Risk Management Act requires amendments to ensure that the government of Jamaica can swiftly and comprehensively respond to any emergency, as well as to introduce a specific enforceable system of sanctions against those who continue to create chaos and confusion in breaking the various laws that are put in place to ensure that our public health protocols are maintained. With these few remarks, Madam Speaker, I will now move to the Disaster Risk Management Amendment Bill, clause by clause. Clause 1 identified the bill and stated that it should be read as the original Disaster Risk Management Act. Clause 2 is amended to expand the categories of persons who are defined as authorized officers under the Act. There are 7 such categories, Madam Speaker, which includes the municipal police, Chief Executive Officer of the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, the Commissioner of Customs, the Senior Director in the Technical Services of the Department of the Ministry responsible for local government. Clause 2 also contains 6 critical changes to some of the definition of the category of disaster in the Principal Act, Madam Speaker. By way of example, the definition of the term disaster has been expanded to include the specific terms hazardous material, incident, pandemic, nuclear or radiation, emergency. These terms, as well as others including environment exposure and hazard, has also been given specific meanings in Clause 2. Subclause 1 of Clause 26, which deals with the declaration of a disaster area, is amended to make it clear that the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, ODPEM, can report threat of any type of disaster to the Minister of Local Government the moment it is apparent. Subsection 5 is also amended to confirm the authority of an authorized officer, an employee of ODPEM, or any other person authorized in writing by the Director General of the agency to enter premises to ensure compliance with the provisions of the Act. Clause 27, Madam Speaker, is amended to give an authorized officer or any authorized person who is enforcing compliance the authority and the option to warn a person or persons that failure to comply violate subclause 52(1)(b) of the Act. This is important as currently an authorized officer cannot proceed to prosecute a breach of the Act without first warning the offender. And this, Madam Speaker, is the most critical and important component of the amendment that is being made to this bill, Madam Speaker. All right. Let me repeat it, Madam Speaker. The amendment is to give an authorized officer or any authorized person who is enforcing compliance the option, Madam Speaker, that was never there before. So what we are now seeing is that this Act is currently, this is important as currently an authorized officer cannot proceed to prosecute a breach without first warning the offender. With this amendment, persons can be prosecuted for breaches without a formal warning being given, Madam Speaker, and I think this is critical important in this amendment. I now move to Clause 52, which is to amend and to include a structure of offenses and penalties, including fixed penalties in relation to the order made under the Act. This clause specified through the 5th schedule that produced to be applied when a constable deems that an offense has been committed. This includes serving of a formal notice, which essentially a ticket that specifies the details surrounding the offense. The notice also offers a chance of paying a fixed penalty for the offense within a specified period of time, failing which the notice becomes a summons to the court, a summons to appear in court to answer the charges. Importantly, also, those provisions reflect fairness, as a maximum of 30 days must pass between the date of the notice is issued and the date that the fixed penalty is to be paid. Additionally, Madam Speaker, anyone who has to face the courts for failing to pay the penalties will not be liable for conviction for the alleged offense if the fixed penalty is paid before the final judgment of the case is delivered. In the very instance, Madam Speaker, the fines are to be paid at any collectorate through the website of Tax Administration Jamaica. The form of the notice is also displayed in the schedule. Clause 52 also contains the 6th schedule, which addresses the list of fixed penalties for breaches. This list has 10 levels or tiers of fixed penalties, which range from $3,000 for the first level offense to $500,000 for the 10th level. There are 40 offenses specified that attract these fixed penalties. Madam Speaker, I want quickly just to give the House and the country a clear insight into the structure of these penalties. For example, if you fail to wear a mask in public, do not maintain this 6-foot social distancing rule, or breach the protocols governing public transportation, you have committed an offense. And if the police serve you a notice, the fixed penalty, Madam Speaker, is $5,000. If you fail to stay inside your place of residence during a curfew, the fixed penalty, Madam Speaker, is $10,000. If a gym is operated outside the time specified, or small outdoor events are held in breach of the order, the fixed penalty is $20,000. Madam Speaker, persons who normally reside in Jamaica and on returning to the island from overseas fail or refuse to remain in quarantine or to obey the other directives or order is liable for a fine of $25,000 if a person who does not normally reside in Jamaica or who is a tourist refuse to stay inside the resilient corridor as required. The penalty is $30,000. Any person who has COVID-19 and refuse to stay in quarantine is subjected to a fine of $50,000, and the same amount apply to any employer who does not comply with the specified workplace requirements. Madam Speaker, for offense of conducting funerals, burials, weddings, or any other worship service in contravention of the order in force, the fixed penalty, Madam Speaker, is $100,000. This penalty also applies where bars operated outside of the time specified does not have the necessary license under the spirit license. Anyone who operates a hotel, a resort cottage that is not licensed under the Tourist Board Act, certified by the Tourism Product Development Committee, or located within the resilient corridor is subjected to a fixed penalty of $500,000. This fine is also applies to any hotel, resort that breaches COVID-19 protocols, and to any nightclub, amusement park, water attraction that is operated when it is ordered closed. Any company in the business processing outsourcing sector that is not certified by the Director General of ODPEM, or which breaches the COVID-19 operational protocol, is also subjected to this fine. With respect to the matter of these fixed penalties or fines, I wish to make one thing clear. These penalties do not replace the sanctions for offenses that are already in the Principal Disaster Risk Management Act. Anyone who commits an offense, who is brought to the court, convicted before a resident magistrate, parish court, is still liable to the maximum fine of $1 million or to imprisonment not exceeding 1 year. Clause 52A is a new subclause which prescribes the manner in which a notice is to be served on a person deemed to have committed a breach. The notice may be served personally, by registered mail or electronically. Madam Speaker, the second schedule of the Act has been changed to add the mayor of each municipal corporation, the chief public health officer in the Ministry of Health, to the membership of the National Disaster Risk Management Council. I just want to mention this again quickly, Madam Speaker. This amendment to this schedule section of the Act will afford the mayors or the chairmen of the municipalities and the chief medical officer of health to sit as legitimate members of the National Disaster Risk Management Council. Madam Speaker, these amendments to the Disaster Risk Management Act are clear. They have been crafted in pursuit of clear objectives. The circumstances in which the Act can be invoked have been expanded to ensure that the government has at all times the legislative authority within which it can respond swiftly to challenges and to secure the interests of the population. At the same time, these changes set out clear sanctions for those who undermine the mission of balancing livelihoods through personal and other forms of irresponsibility, Madam Speaker, and who at this point in time, is hindering the efforts to save lives and to save the country in the face of rising numbers of infection and hospitalization. I therefore, Madam Speaker, put to this Honourable House the amendments for the Disaster Risk Management Act of 2021, Madam Speaker, and I invite this Honourable House to consider and make the wise decision that we safeguard the interests of the Jamaican people. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Speaker. Sorry. Madam Speaker, the Disaster Risk Management Act in Section 57, subsection 2, requires that a review of the Act be done within 3 years after it was brought into effect. That review is supposed to be done by a committee of both houses of the Act itself, the principal Act, which is a significant piece of legislation. That review hasn't taken place. We have a bill before us amending the Act in certain, really around the enforcement aspects of the Act. And there was some talk about it going to a joint select committee. I don't think there's sufficient in here that would necessitate that. And I had said that to the minister. But the review of the Act itself, which is overdue, ought to have taken place, because a year into a pandemic where the entire regulatory framework in which Jamaica has had to be operating arises under this Act, there really ought to have been a review of it to see whether it is fit for purpose, whether it's doing its job, where it's weak, where it's strong, etc. So, in a sense, I think it has been derelict of this Parliament and the government as the persons with the majority in Parliament for this review not to have taken place so far. I don't know when it will happen. Madam Speaker, I do have some concerns with the bill, and conceptually it is problematic, and I'll say why. The Act as it exists now allows the Prime Minister to make orders. And the grounds upon which the orders can be made, or the objectives that the orders are to be made for, are very broad. They are for removing or otherwise guarding against hazards. Hazards are a whole wide array of dangers and the probable consequences of them, or mitigating those hazards. Those are the principal, very broad grounds upon which those orders can be made by the Prime Minister. under the original scheme of the Act, under the Act as it stands today, now, a breach of the order made by the Prime Minister is not an offense. The provision in the Act, Section 52, that creates the offenses, does not make the breach of the order an offense. That is, the orders are made under Section 26, and there is no offense for breaching an order under Section 26. Section 27 deals with the powers of authorized persons, policemen, and there's a whole long list of persons who are authorized persons for this purpose. And indeed, that list is now being made even longer by this amendment. They can give various forms of directions on a whole range of topics. In fact, 27 goes from A to R in subparagraphs of things that they can give instructions around. And a failure to comply with that, with an instruction given by an authorized person, if a warning is given for non-compliance and the warning is not heeded, is a criminal offense. But under the scheme of the Act now, as it stands today, the warning is mandatory. The offense is not committed if the warning is not given. So, to repeat, the scheme of the Act as it stands now is that the Prime Minister can make these orders, but breaching the orders is not a criminal offense. Authorized persons can give certain directions, and if those directions are not heeded by the public, a warning must be given. If the warning is not given, then that is an offense. Now, the scheme of the Act says that the Prime Minister can make these orders of his own volition. There is no parliamentary oversight whatsoever of those orders. And that was a permissible way of proceeding when this Act was originally passed, because the breach of the orders was not a criminal offense. Now we're changing that, because what this bill is doing is to make a breach of the measures required by the orders a criminal offense. And it's a criminal offense that's punishable by a fine of up to $1 million or by imprisonment for up to 1 year. So it is a serious thing we're talking about. And the question really is this in keeping with our general democratic system of governance, that the Prime Minister can make orders determining conduct which will be a criminal offense if not complied with, without Parliament being involved in deciding whether or not that conduct should be criminalized. And that is not something I've seen in any other law that we have enacted since I have been a parliamentarian. So theoretically, for example, an order could say that if you don't get a vaccination, that's an offense. I don't think the government would do that. But theoretically, that could happen. And there could be a whole range, one's imagination could go far and wide in imagining the kind of conduct that an order could encapsulate, and which would now be criminal if it wasn't complied with. And the Parliament would have no say as to whether or not that conduct ought to be made criminal. I have a big problem with that, Madam Speaker. The normal approach to matters such as this is that when regulations are being made, and an order is a form of regulation, where regulations are being made, they are typically brought back to the House to be approved by a resolution. Normally, the formulation in the law is that they require affirmative resolution. Affirmative resolution under the Interpretation Act means that it must be approved not only by the House of Representatives, but also by the Senate. And that provides a safeguard. First of all, it's more transparent. And secondly, it allows the Parliament to decide whether or not they want this particular piece of law to become law. That doesn't happen with the bill as brought here. As brought here, going forward, if we pass this bill, an order can be made, it can ban or restrict a whole range of things And if the public breach it, it's a criminal offense, punishable by a fine of up to $1 million or imprisonment for up to 1 year. I have a problem with that, Madam Speaker. I don't think that is consistent with our traditions of democratic governance and with the importance of ensuring that the legislature, as the elected representatives accountable to the people, provide a check and balance for executive power. I think that we should look at this again and see what mechanism can be put into this bill to ensure that the orders have to come to Parliament for approval. That is a normal thing, and that is missing from this. As I've said, another amendment provides that where the authorized persons, the police, the military, whoever it may be, find somebody who is not complying with their own direction, no longer is a warning mandatory. It is, they may or may not give a warning, and this provision expressly says that the giving of a warning shall not be a precondition to the prosecution of an offense under Section 27. So the warning is completely up to the person who has given the direction, whether they want to give a warning or not. If they don't feel like it, they don't have to, and they can prosecute you for not having complied with what they've told you to do. So this particular bill is doing something very fundamental in the context of the Disaster Risk Management Act. As I said before, previously, the scheme of the Act was if an authorized person gives a direction under Section 27 and it is not complied with, they must give a warning to allow the person to correct their conduct. If they get that warning and they don't comply with it, that is an offense. The order made by the Prime Minister, which has a whole range of things in it, from border control to churches to funerals to a whole range of things. The breach of that was not a criminal offense. And the Prime Minister did not have to bring it here. He could make those orders himself with his pen in his office. This is being changed by this bill. Going forward, whatever he puts in the order will become a criminal offense if it's breached. Parliament has no say in the matter whatsoever. And going forward, if an authorized person tells you jump and you don't jump, it's a criminal offense. He doesn't have to give you a warning for not having jumped. That is the scheme of the bill. Now, the bill also introduces the concept of fixed penalty notices as an additional option given to law enforcement. So if they decide they don't want to charge you and carry before the court, they can issue a fixed notice, which is like a ticket, and if you pay it within the 30-day period, the matter comes to an end without going before the court. Now, the way in which the bill is drafted says that in order to come within the fixed penalty notice regime, it has to be an offense which is subject to a fixed penalty. I've been trying to identify where it is that it is made clear what offenses are subject to a fixed penalty. I haven't really been able to find that, because in Section 54 of that, which is a section that allows the minister to make regulations, a new paragraph is being added, a paragraph E, which says that the minister can make regulations specifying the offenses that are subject to fixed penalties. So it suggests then that until those regulations are made, there are no offenses that are subject to fixed penalties. But when you look at an earlier provision, which is the new paragraph 10, or subclause 10, in what is 52, it suggests otherwise, because it says, where a person contravenes a requirement, restriction, or direction under a measure specified in regulations made under this Act, which would include the ministerial orders made by the Prime Minister, the fixed penalty applicable to such an offence shall be specified in those regulations, i.e. in the order. by reference to the tier of penalties. It's thus not clear to me whether it is intended that there will be a set of regulations that say what offences are subject to fixed penalties and what are not, or if it is just being left to the orders to determine that. And I find that the confusion, to my mind, arises from the fact that paragraph E is being added to section 54.1 to contemplate that there would be regulations doing this. I'm not sure what is intended. So, Madam Speaker, I think the whole country is concerned about the lack of compliance by some people with the protocols that the government has put in place, the social distancing and other protocols. But the truth is that for some sectors or subsegments of the society, there are real social pressures at play in the communities in which they live, and they find it difficult sometimes to comply with some of these protocols. And that is why you see such a large, it's so common that you see people on the road after curfew, outside their yard and so on, because sometimes the yard is hot, it's congested, etc., and so on. Going forward, they will now be fined, potentially, or imprisoned if they don't comply with the order to go back inside, whether there's a warning or not. And they may be ticketed as well. I'm not sure if the ticketing arises. It isn't clear to me what the mechanism would be for enforcing the ticket. It's not like a driver's situation, a motorist who has a driver's license and has all of their identity information on that. You know, a person who's on the street who is not complying with the orders may not have any identification at all. So I don't know. I guess in that instance, they would have to arrest and take the person to jail. So, Madam Speaker, my response to this bill is I sympathize and understand what the government is seeking to do. I understand that they feel that the existing regime is not sufficiently robust in its enforcement mechanisms. But the way that the bill is approaching this is, to my mind, misconceived. It affords the Prime Minister, the executive, the capacity to determine what is criminal, what amounts to a criminal offense, without the Parliament having any role.
You have just watched the live coverage of the National Budget Debate. Thanks for watching.
Up next, the Supreme Ventures Lottery Draw.